Let's jump right into it. Today, we're breaking down a highly entertaining, completely chaotic, and honestly multi-layered live stream featuring literally some of the biggest global megastars on the planet right now, BTS. Because, when you strip away the massive stadium stages, the intense, perfectly synced choreography, and those flawlessly curated outfits, what are these guys actually like behind the scenes? Well, as we're going to see from this broadcast, they are surprisingly, hilariously normal.
I mean, take a look at this. Do I really have to go this far just to eat one piece of bread? That's a direct quote, folks, and it perfectly sets the stage for what we're looking at today. We're talking about untouchable celebrity icons, right? Yet the core of their stories revolves around the absolute basics. We're talking fighting for snacks, fiercely arguing about childhood cartoons, and the messy realities of just living out of a suitcase. Which actually brings us right into their everyday reality on tour.
Section 1. Life on the Road. Exploring everyday life and food on a massive global tour.
The sheer contrast here is just wild. You'd probably think post-concert downtime involved these super glamorous, exclusive parties, right? Well, actually no. Instead, they're huddled up in hotel rooms eating leftover Stanford pizza. Or, in one very specific, very funny case, you've got Jimin wandering into another member's room late at night, practically begging to eat leftover LA Galbi, even though the grease had already turned solid white from sitting out. That is the highly relatable, definitely unglamorous reality of life on the road.
And speaking of food, this perfectly illustrates a major culinary culture clash they joked about. So Jimin is a guy who loves his food served instantly. He vastly prefers walking into a casual Korean spot and just having a boiling hot bowl of salongtang slammed right on the table in minutes. Boom, ready to eat. So you can imagine his reaction when the guys dragged him to a Michelin 3-star restaurant for a 3.5-hour fine dining experience. It was absolute torture for him. He was literally losing his mind waiting 10 minutes between these tiny bite-sized appetizer courses. Their other downtime habits are just as grounded. When they aren't on stage performing for tens of thousands of screaming fans, they're playing intensely competitive pickleball, walking around snapping photos of Stanford's campus in matching outfits, and, like a lot of us, just struggling to fall asleep. In fact, one of their late-night strategies is honestly hilarious. They put the volume on the absolute minimum and watch 4-hour-long StarCraft Pro Gamer replays. It's exactly the kind of 3 a.m. internet rabbit hole anyone could fall down. Moving on to Section 2, the great anime debate over nostalgic 90s cartoons.
Okay, so let's dive into what might be the absolute funniest segment of this entire live stream. Now, you might think their deep, late-night philosophical debates are about music theory or world peace, but nope. These guys spent a massive chunk of their live broadcast arguing, and I mean passionately arguing, over iconic 90s nostalgia. It really just highlights how relatable and honestly geeky these global icons can be when the cameras are just casually rolling.
So the crux of this grand debate, Pokemon versus Digimon. And let me tell you, they get surprisingly analytical here. The pro-Digimon side makes a solid case about the deep, unyielding loyalty between the characters. They point out that in Pokemon, Ash just sort of unromantically swaps out his Pokemon the second they faint in battle. But on the other hand, the pro-Pokemon side essentially argues that Pokemon won the IP war. They call it a massive global cash machine that just constantly pumps out new characters to sell merchandise. It's this hilarious pseudo-business analysis of the exact cartoons they watched as kids.
And you guys, the emotional investment here is off the charts. They literally spent minutes mourning the tragic backstory of Cubone. The Pokemon who wears its deceased mother's skull as a helmet. One of them points out, they don't tell you about that background and this childhood background. They aren't just casual fans. They know the deep lore and the emotional childhood trauma of these animated characters. It's too good.
All right, Section 3, Hilarious Military Memories. This is a mandatory rite of passage in South Korea, and it produced some absolute comedic gold.
So remember that opening quote we talked about, the one about the bread? Well, here's the full context. Back at basic training, the guys quickly realized that the religious services handed out free snacks. So they hatched an actual plot to recruit a squad of 8 guys just to attend the Catholic church service. They literally went through the process of studying and receiving Catholic baptismal names. And no, this wasn't out of some sudden spiritual awakening. It was strictly a tactical maneuver to score some delicious bread. You can't make this up.
Then there are the realities of the military night shifts, which brought their own unique challenges. This is brilliant little story they shared about the sheer, high-stakes panic of having to wake up Jungkook for regular night duty shift. Apparently, he was in such a deep sleep that waking him up without waking the entire barracks and risking everyone's absolute wrath was treated like a delicate, high-tension bomb defusal mission. One wrong move, and the whole room blows up.
Now take a look at this number, 660,000 won. That is the amount spent in a single, massive transaction at the military PX, which is basically the base convenience store. And let me tell you, that transaction caused absolute chaos on the base. So here's what happened. One of the members generously handed their credit card to the junior soldiers and told them, hey, go buy yourself some snacks. But instead, these recruits swiped the card for over 100 items, which literally caused the base's cash register to completely break down. The officers were furious. And the absolute best part? Alongside health supplies for their moms, these soldiers had stocked up on massive amounts of expensive snail cream. Like the quote says, isn't snail cream a bit much? It's just an incredibly funny story of a kind gesture totally backfiring.
Which brings us to our final section. Section 4, Unforgettable Concert Moments.
Bringing things back to their core purpose, they shared some truly incredible highlights from the tour itself. They opened up about the extreme physical challenge of performing in Mexico at over 2,300 meters of altitude in absolutely sweltering heat. But they noted how the intense raw energy of the crowd literally fueled them through the exhaustion. They also talked about how seeing fans wildly dancing at Stanford pushed them to perform even harder. Oh, and they even shared their genuine shock and amusement at spotting mid-crowd marriage proposals happening during the romantic songs. Like, imagine performing and seeing a proposal right in the front row.
But you know, beneath all the hilarious jokes about snail cream and Digimon, what really grounds this entire livestream is their profound gratitude. They wrapped up their broadcast by expressing how deeply moved they were to see the Taegukgi, the South Korean flag, waving in the crowds halfway across the world. It's just a really beautiful reminder of the deep mutual bond they share with their massive fan base known as ARMY.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we've clearly seen that underneath the global superstar status, they're really just some guys who argue over childhood cartoons and love a good slice of pizza. It leaves us with this final thought for you to chew on. If you were out on a massive, grueling global world tour, what highly relatable, everyday hobby would you bring with you? Think about it, and we'll catch you next time.